This is She's on Call, a weekly show hosted by ENT specialist Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and General Surgeon Dr. Marina Kurian. They'll be joined by guest experts to discuss an array of newsworthy medical and health issues. You're invited to ask the doctors anything. The physicians and their guests' views are their own and do not represent any institution. Please contact your doctor for any personal questions. Please hit share and join us live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at She's on Call, hashtag She's on Call. Please welcome our hosts.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar. I'm an ear, nose, and throat surgeon, aka otolaryngologist, head and neck surgeon in practice in New York City and Wayne, New Jersey.
I'm Marina Kurian. I'm a general surgeon, but I do a lot of weight loss surgery and minimal invasive surgery in New York City. And we have such a great show planned today for you guys. We're so excited. Tomorrow is International Women's Day, but we thought we'd jump it and do a great show today for you guys, all about women and trailblazers in medicine.
So we have two amazing guests. They are truly two of the top leader women physicians in the United States, if not around the world. We have Dr. Julie Freischlag, who is Dean of Wake Forest School of Medicine, CEO of Wake Forest Baptist Health, and Chief Academic Officer of Atrium Health. She's also President-elect of the American College of Surgeons. We have Dr. Carol Bradford, who is Dean of the Ohio State College of Medicine, the Ohio State College of Medicine, and President of the American Academy of Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery. Both of these women have held incredible leadership posts before they got to these very high levels of leadership, and we're really looking forward to talking with them on our International Women's Day celebration edition.
But you guys know, Suju and I are going to chat a little bit. We have about, a few minutes to talk, and we're going to talk about COVID again, sadly. Very sad, but that's where we are. Yeah. We still have to keep talking about it. There's some good news, though, right? We had a third vaccine that's approved. So we're expecting 100 million doses by June, and they've already started rolling them out, which is really fantastic news. And we have a card to show you what's been happening. So we've had Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, and we have a slide to show you about how many vaccines that have been already put up in the U.S. And I'm sure worldwide there are a lot more.
So we've had 28 million full vaccinations and 54 million first vaccinations, with a total of 83 million doses already in the United States. And remember, these vaccines were not approved via emergency use authorization until December 11th, 2020. So this is remarkable. We're seeing that the rollout, which had a pretty rocky start, is getting better. I read an article today about a young Asian American man in Queens who developed this bot that goes on Twitter, and it's called TurboVax. And it tells you where the open slots are in the area. Now, unfortunately, older people don't really use Twitter. So the cities are going into communities and trying to deliver the vaccine right then and there. And we really think the single shot Johnson & Johnson will be a game changer just because of the lack of necessity for coming back.
I think that's true as well. But I feel like most people have been showing up for their second shot, so, yes. But having the Johnson & Johnson, the fact that it doesn't have to be stored at cold storage or super cold storage is really great also. We have another slide for you guys looking at what's actually happening state by state. So it's just sort of a map of the U.S. And you can see we still have a long way to go. The darkest orange is where 14% of each of these states is fully vaccinated. And the guys that are way ahead, as you can see, West Virginia is doing great. I can't read so close.
New Mexico, I think.
New Mexico. That was the one. I'm really bad at geography. I'm like, what's next to Texas? Right. So some states are getting it.
And Alaska. Right. I mean, we've had.
We have some great news about California. So what part of the problem of the rollout has been that it's been disproportionate to people who have access. There's been some disparity in the communities that are most at risk. So California has a little plan ahead. So do you want to discuss that?
Yeah. So, we know that COVID, unfortunately, has asymmetrically affected rural communities, poorer communities, and communities of color. And so getting the vaccines, not just to elderly people who can get more severe disease, healthcare and frontline workers who are exposed more, but in fact, those other communities where they are hit the hardest is really important. So California is really rolling out to the communities where they need them the most, with special codes that are given, special access to people living inside those communities. And I think we're seeing, after that initial rush to grab the front row tickets, I actually think we're seeing people being more reasonable and more logical about waiting their turn, because their turn doesn't seem so far away anymore.
Absolutely. Here I am trying to. The other issue I think that's coming forth is that some healthcare workers have been like, you know what, I'm not really ready to take it right away. Whereas, the two of us ran right in and signed up immediately. As I always kept joking that I'll be your Huckleberry. I'll go in there and get that shot before everyone, just to make sure that everything's okay. But there's some reasons that people didn't want to get it, including healthcare. They have some of the background that's needed to really understand that this wasn't rushed, and this is really, an appropriate methodology behind getting the vaccine ready based on years and years of research done in other labs, so that we were sort of set up and primed to bring these vaccines forward. But naming it warp speed may not have been, or implying that we're trying to get it as fast as we can, kind of gives people that pause. And I think the real thing to understand is that the science has been there for years. And thank God for those labs that we had put up in a prior show, that the labs who had been working on this for years.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a funny conversation with a patient this week who was, getting ready for his first shot. And he asked me if it was safe. And I said, I sure hope so, because otherwise all the doctors and nurses are being taken out by this vaccine. So then, so we are taking it because it is safe to take. So please take the vaccine when it's your turn. I see Yuri Agarwal, who is an otolaryngologist, checked in from Baltimore, Maryland. As you know, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And we'd love to hear from you. Please check in where you're watching us from, and send in some questions, because we are going to go right to our amazing guests.
That's right. So again, our guests are trailblazers in medicine. We're so happy to have them both. Dr. Carol Bradford is the dean at The Ohio State Medical School, and she's president of the American Academy of Otolaryngology and Head and Neck Surgery. And Dr. Julie Freischlag, she's dean and CEO of Wake Forest Medical Center, also president-elect of the ACS, and she is the chief academic officer at Atrium Health as well. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We were so excited. We're like, fangirls. I was like, yay!
When do you get to talk to your heroes, right? Come on.
So great. Only because, you guys have accomplished so much and done it. It seems effortless, but we know how hard it is to get along in your careers for everybody. And sometimes it feels like it's much harder when you're in certain situations, certain areas. Dr. Freischlag, you're in vascular surgery, historically a very tough place to be, very, I don't want to say aggressive, but, you're dealing with a lot of patients that are very sick, a lot of emergency surgeries, a lot of things that are really on the line, and historically a very male-dominated field. And for you to have started and risen and done it with such grace, I've had the opportunity to meet you a couple of times, and have always been struck by your equanimity, in the face of all of the things that you've had to face. How do you get that done? And, how does anybody, these are such broad questions. I should probably bring it down to, how did you get started and get into vascular surgery?
Well, I think, thank you so much for having us here, because Carol and I actually know each other, which is actually sort of nice since we can't see anybody, it's nice to see a few of you. And I think part of it is when I went off to do surgery as a medical student, that was not my plan. But when I walked into that operating room, which I'm sure happened to the three of you, all of a sudden it was like, this is what I can do. I'm really interested in this. I'm excited about this. I love the disease processes, and I had a few mentors and sponsors then that got me into a great training program. And my first rotation at UCLA as an intern was on vascular with Dr. Wesley Moore and Ron Busatil, who are my mentors and sponsors to this day. I loved the intricacy of operating. I loved the emergent urgent piece. And for anyone, I would just tell you, go off and be a really great whatever you chose to be. Be a great vascular surgeon, otolaryngologist, and then you can go off and lead. I was the sixth woman to get her certificate in the country in vascular surgery because it just began in the 80s. And I was the only woman division chief in vascular when I did that at UCLA, with only one before. So you will look around and not see people like you. And so we're so looking forward to all of you coming up to lead, because we like to look around and see some people that look like you. But I think keeping your North Star, being a great doctor, having those communication skills that you have with your patients, with your faculty and other people you deal with, and always tell the truth.
So thank you. We have people checking in from North Carolina, from Brooklyn, from Atlanta, from Glen Ridge, from Columbus, Ohio. Thank you all for watching, and please send in questions for these amazing leaders. Carol, I'm going to ask you a very similar question. Otolaryngology, head and neck surgery could be, ear, nose, and tennis, or it could be big, jaw, tongue, neck resections for big cancers, working with therapy doctors, working with radiation oncologists, working with reconstruction surgeons. You are not only president of the American Academy of Otolaryngology now, but you were the first, or one of the first women presidents of the American Head and Neck Surgery Society, right? So can you talk to us about your journey?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And it's really a privilege and honor to be on this show today. So thank you all for the invitation, and thank you all to all of our listeners for joining the program this morning. So yes, I, like Julie, Dr. Freischlag, I was really, I didn't come from a family of doctors, but I knew in elementary school I wanted to be a physician. And then my career really had a lot of great mentors and sponsors and coaches and role models. And in the day, most of those people, if not all of those people, happened to be men, because there were very few, like Julie, there were very few women ahead of me. And so I knew early on in medical school that I wanted to be an otolaryngologist. And actually one of the people was on student council, and that was actually a she. And she was going into otolaryngology, and immediately intrigued me because I was also, as a junior medical student, on student council. And then entered, was lucky enough to match at the University of Michigan. When, curiously enough, my mentors told me they didn't take women in otolaryngology at the University of Michigan, but I felt very, very proud to have matched there and trained there, and really had a lot of support and mentorship throughout all of my years there. And so was fortunate to be nominated to be on the finance committee, and then the council of the American Head and Neck Society. And then ultimately, I was the first female president of the American Head and Neck Society in 2012. And ironically, I had the chance to invite Dr. Freischlag to serve as my keynote lecturer for that. And so, and that's actually when she and I got to know each other. So it's kind of ironic that we're all here this morning, and it's equally ironic that I'm serving as president right now of the American Academy of Otolaryngology head and neck surgery, whereas Julie Freischlag is serving as the president-elect of the American College of Surgeons. So congratulations, Julie. You continue to lead and be a role model and mentor for me as well.
I'm so excited to have you guys. That I jumped the gun a little bit and just wanted to hear your stories. But we were actually going to start slow and not bring in the greatness first. But we want to just pop up some slides that the AMA put up on women in medicine and what the historical timeline is. And you can see that the first medical degree was Elizabeth Blackwell in 1849. And you're like, hey, okay, so that was a while ago. It should be really awesome by now. And then as we go through, our first Black American woman that earned a degree was in 1864. And then the first woman to join the AMA, which is representative of all the physicians in the country, was 1876. And then you see that none of these women held any positions until 1969. And if you can pop up the next one, and that was a vice president position, you see that there was a board chair, and then she was inaugurated as the first female president in 1998. So we went from the 1800s to 1998 to have a woman in a leadership position with our National Medical Society. And then you can see how it goes from there. And we had the first African-American woman to be elected in 2018.
You know, the AMA had its first 3-fer, which was the past president, and president-elect all being women in 2019. So we may have taken a while to get there, but man, oh man, are we getting there. I was the third woman president of the American Academy of Otolaryngology head and neck surgery, and Jennifer Dearberry was the first, and then it took another 10 years before the second, but then the next year I was the third. So change can happen, which is extraordinary and wonderful. As presidents of your society, so let's start with your national roles, and then we're going to go to your institutional roles. What are you going to do to ensure diversity, equity, inclusion, ensure that all the voices at the table are actually heard? And let's start with you, Julie.
That's a tough question.
It's so important to be out there, making sure you show ways you're inclusive. And for me, I think speaking out about it, even though it sometimes can be a bit uncomfortable, is real important. When I was president of the Society of Vascular Surgery, I was the first woman to do so. My whole talk was on inclusivity as my presidential talk, including not only women, people of color, but community physicians, as well as our physician assistants and everyone that participates in the care of a vascular patient. So I think making sure that you do talk about it, you make sure that your teams are very diverse. I know I've spent lots of time making sure my teams also have youth on them, making sure you have young members of your society on your teams, as well as those that are seasoned veterans, because the world is changing so quickly. COVID-19 has been very devastating, but it has done a lot for us to make us move quickly and fast, so that we actually can be flexible, that we can be able to do these kind of things very quickly, be out there so you can have comments and situations. And I think also making sure that people understand that because of that diversity, what women, color, age, background, where you trained, who trained you, you're going to make better decisions, and you're going to actually advance the society even faster.
We want to ask Carol. We have a slide up on what it means to have equality versus equity, and what we see right now is that at least half, if not 51%, of some of the medical schools are women, right? And we know that doesn't always translate to 51% of every specialty in surgery is half women. That's not what's happening. But I like this slide. This was from the International Women's Day, that gender equality is a human fight, not a female fight, right? Which speaks to he for she. And then this one is very great also, showing what equality and equity really are. And we have one more slide talking about that as well, just as a different representation of equality doesn't mean treating everyone the same, right? Equality means giving everyone the same chance. So, Carol, how do you see this as it impacts what you're doing in medical training or in surgical training?
So this is just such an important concept for us, this concept of equity. And I think that you are correct. We have more than half of the medical students in our country are women. And so but it's not just getting into medical school that's important, but equity is really different, as you've highlighted, than equality. And equity means gender, race, background, socioeconomic status, disability status. It's a very inclusive comment, and it's something that we are committed to at the College of Medicine. And we want collectively, and I think this will resonate with all of us, that the health professionals in our communities to reflect and look like the communities we serve, because we believe that with equity, we have excellence in care and equity to care. And, the program began talking about COVID, and I think the COVID social challenges have really shown a very bright light on the challenges we have in our country on health equity. And so, the more diverse we as the health professions community can be, then we can really begin to address providing equitable care and accessible care to all members of all communities that we serve. And I would say that both at the Ohio State College of Medicine as well as at the American Academy of Otolaryngology Head and Neck Surgery, we are deeply committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as working very hard to address and achieve health equity.
We have, thank you both. We've acknowledged that half the medical school class is women. And because it's International Women's Day, maybe we'll focus on the male-female issue today. We do focus on all issues, but today for International Women's Day, we'll take our prerogative and focus on that. We've had 50% of medical students be women for just about 8 to 10 years at this point, somewhere in that range. There's a graphic we have that shows, however, that really less than about 20% max of deans of medical schools are women. And so this slide shows that there are 28 women deans of medical schools versus 120. But if you go down the line for academic rank, which those of you who are not in medicine may not understand, but there's a lot of power in academic rank in terms of being able to influence change, being able to teach, and in fact, even being able to make money. So the academic rank is really important. And you can see that at the lowest rank, which is where we all started as assistant professors, if we go to the next couple of slides, you'll see that women have slowly increased in rank to dean over the last 25 years or so, up to a little bit less than 20%. And then the next slide will show you that most of us are still at the instructor level or the assistant professor level, as opposed to the higher levels of leadership. So, Carol, as you are counseling students at the Ohio State Medical School, and as you travel around the world, whether it's really or virtually in this COVID era, what do you tell them? How do you advise them to prepare themselves and situate themselves if they wish to pursue leadership?
So thank you. And I think it's really, really important to achieve gender equity. We need to have equal rates of women and men as we ascend the academic ladder and the leadership ladder. And I think how we achieve that is, I'll tell a little bit of my story. I was, I think, very fortunate to be involved in a lot of leadership development courses. And so did ELAM, which is at Drexel University, at Leadership Development for Women in Academic Medicine. But even before that, I was blessed to be part of the Global Institute in Leadership Development many years ago, as well as being a part of the Healthcare Leadership Institute at the University of Michigan in partnership with the business school there. And so the first thing we need to do is take advantage of those leadership development and growth opportunities. Secondly, I think you need really strong mentors, coaches, and sponsors. And I think thirdly, you need to have smaller leadership, those division chief roles, those assistant dean roles, those important and you know, service chief roles in your practice plan, quality other leadership roles in your hospitals and health systems, because those experiences are really the building blocks to ultimately have that skill set to be a strong candidate for larger leadership roles. Another really important point I want to make is that we have to implement best practices for all leadership searches so that our search committees are diverse and that everybody really has an equal chance of advancing to the leadership roles.
I was going to ask you guys if you had leadership coaches, but there are obviously, as you said, these executive leadership programs. Julie, did you, when did you start getting into that type of leadership coaching, or was it more as one of these programs as Carol described?
Well, I did just what Carol did too. I was in the second ELAM class as I came out of Milwaukee to become a division chief at UCLA. I didn't really have a coach per se till I went to Hopkins and was chair of surgery. And Dick Kilberg, who was in the Office of Talent Management, walked in my office and said, "You need a coach." And I told him I really wasn't playing sports. At this time, I was a swimmer, but he said, "You need a coach." And he was the first one that worked with me, because when I went to Hopkins, I was the only woman chair there for 11 years. And I had looked at a few other chairs of surgery too, and I was only the fourth one in the country. He really taught me a lot of things. He taught me how to have crucial conversations. He role played and helped me learn how to fire people. He taught me how to include people. He really did an amazing job, and I actually used him a little bit later on with that. Right now, I'm using actually Janet Dombrowski, who Carol knows from University of Michigan, and that is the one thing I've given to all my up and rising leaders, of which about half are women right now, is to give them a coach to figure out how are you going to lead at your institution, utilizing your core, who you are and what you do, realizing how you're perceived. I think that's one of the most important things, is how are you perceived? And then what kind of problems do you want to solve? So where do you want to get involved? I actually tell people when you interview for a job with me at the end of asking me everything you want, if you then look at me and say, what can I do for you? If I came to work for you at your organization, what problem would you like solved? And then immediately I'll hire you, because I have lots of problems to be solved. But go solve the problem that you really care about and are interested in. And those of us that are leading will notice that. But I do think now's the time that you need to lead as women, because we do have a pipeline. And you can influence a lot from not being the leader, just being part of the team, but you cannot change things unless you lead. So being influential on your way up, but to lead. I did tell David Scorton, who just took over the AAMC, that the number of women deans, I thought that room would be full of women, because I've been in surgery where there weren't many. has been the same, as you saw, for the last 10 or 15 years. So he then put me on his board of directors, said, let no good deed go unpunished. And he is really committed for diversifying the AAMC. I've been very energized with the things he's done. You've seen him make changes and move, even in this year of COVID-19, to do that. But I do think leading will change. Not leading will only influence. And now we need to make change.
So one, to just explain, AAMC is the American Association of Medical Colleges. And it's very important, very influential in our world. Thank you so much. I think the way both of you, Carol and Julie, have described the concept of coaching and mentoring, sponsoring, has taken it out of this sort of ethereal realm where, as you said, Julie, why do I need a coach? I'm not playing a sport. To understanding that it's actually a very important part of our learning process is really good. So I want to switch gears a little bit, because we're all four surgeons sitting here. And yeah, we love to lead and we love to mentor and we love to be nice to people, but we really, really love to operate. And Al Murati, who was a recent president of the American Academy of Otolaryngology, put out on Twitter this sort of icebreaker to surgeons. If you could only do one operation for the rest of your life, what would you do? And of course, right away, we're like, oh no, we would never do only just one. But let's say that was the construct. So, Julie, let me ask you, if you could only do one operation, what would you do and why?
Right now, I only really do one operation. I'm a thoracic outlet surgeon, and I do rib resections. But if I could only do one for the rest of my life, I would do carotid endarterectomy. It's such a finesse operation. You get such a great feeling when you take the plaque out of that carotid artery. You're able to reconstruct it in 3 dimensions, and it's amazing to either prevent or a second stroke or make the stroke not happen at all. So I would do carotids, even though I do ribs right now.
So can I ask you, when you do carotids, are you under local or general? How quickly do you see the outcome? And perhaps you can explain this slide to our viewers.
Well, carotid endarterectomy, I mainly do them all under general anesthesia, just so that we have total control of everything going on. But I have done under local for those that have really bad pulmonary disease. So this slide is excellent. You open up the artery, the plaque tends to always be in the same way. It's right at the orifice of the internal carotid artery, which is on the left, as you can see here, the externals on the right, which actually Carol knows really, really well, because she deals with head and neck as well, too, with the external feeding many of the organs and tissues in the neck. So you use a freer, a small spatula, to go right into the media, the middle part of that artery, remove that plaque and make sure that the end point is perfect. Sometimes you have to tack it down. And this artery is at 1 to 2 millimeters. So it's a small finesse operation. And then you need to patch it. And actually women have higher restenosis rates than men in this operation. So we actually patch all women, but I must admit, I patch most all people so that they don't get recurrent disease.
It's really spectacular. It was one of my favorite to do in vascular, but I went a different route, but it's a beautiful operation. Carol, same question for you. What would be the only operation if you could only do one over and over again? What would it be?
Right. And as a surgeon, that was a hard choice for me as well. But as I reflected on the Twitter journey that we were all on, it's actually the parotidectomy. So Julie talked about carotid. I'm going to start that same word with a P, parotid, and it's the saliva gland in your cheek. And what's interesting about the parotid surgery, we do it for cancerous and non-cancerous tumors. So skin cancers might have lymph nodes that spread, but most masses are actually non-malignant but need to come out so they don't change to cancer. And so the goal of the surgery is to remove the tumor while protecting that yellow, really important facial nerve. So again, meticulous dissection of the facial nerve, and with the goal, whenever possible, of preserving that facial nerve function. So I really think that the facial nerve is the cranial nerve that is the most important in human expression, our facial expression. And so, and I've had the privilege of teaching many residents throughout the course of a fairly long career how to do that parotid operation safely with the goal of, whenever possible, preserving that facial nerve.
You're never fully dressed without a smile, right? I mean, the first thing you see about somebody is what their face looks like. That is also an incredibly beautiful operation. Marina, what about you? What would you do if you could only do one operation?
So Suju asked me this, and I was like, dude, I can't answer that because I really just want to take care of patients. I can't want to do one operation, but she really pressured me. So I picked gastric bypass, which is something that I've done probably about 1,800 of these through my career. And what we're doing, and this is done, originally was done for ulcers, stomach ulcers in the early 1900s. But now it's being done for weight loss. And what we do is we make the stomach super small, bypass part of the stomach, bypass part of the intestine. It's wonderful for weight loss. It does also help a lot of the comorbid conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, and can improve sleep apnea and cholesterol. So overall, what this operation does, it does take the weight down, but also significantly improves someone's physical health. And it's wonderful also for their mobility in terms of their joint pain that they have when they're carrying extra weight, and also for their emotional health and self-esteem. So Suju, lastly, we're going to pick your brain. What's your favorite operation? And I love this, that you actually brought this up, because we talk all the time, but I think it's wonderful people to see that, yeah, we're surgeons. Actually, we have 4 surgeons on, and just what we do and how it's technical, but it's also a very intellectual pursuit. So Jeanette?
So same thing. I had a lot of like, no, I like to do everything. You know, I went from doing ENT to just doing E. So how can you make me even just do only one of the ear surgeries? But I think if I had to pick one, it would be stapes surgery. So the stapes bone is the smallest bone in the body. And you can see it next to a dime over there. That thing that looks like a stirrup is actually a patient of mine's stapes. And when that is not moving properly, you get a significant hearing loss. It's a conductive or mechanical hearing loss for the most part. So we either remove the whole thing, as in this lady's case, or we make a hole in the bottom of it in most cases and replace it with that little stirrup, that little cane-looking thing, and we restore hearing. And I have to tell you, you don't only go into medicine for the immediate gratification, but the immediate gratification for hearing restoration after stapes surgery is extraordinary. I was operating on this older Greek gentleman, like sort of Zorba the Greek, very big and bold, and it was under local anesthesia for this case. And as soon as I put in the prosthesis, he said, "I can hear you now," in this like booming voice. And it was great. And I said, "Okay, could you just hold still for a second?" Because I hadn't even tightened the prosthesis. As soon as he, was done, he said, "Okay, when are you doing the next side?" And so I think the joy that we get from restoring quality of life is incredible.
I want to switch gears, though, because it's wonderful to talk about surgery, but I want to get back from the International Women's Day to some of this stuff. Now, both Sujana and Julie, you had written in this book of stories that Preeti John did on women in surgery. And one of the things, I believe it was you, Julie, you'd written something about this sort of third stage where, I went to college, I went to med school, I did my residency, then I started working. And then you get to this point of, okay, I did all these things, now what? And I forgot who said it, but you discussed it. So did you guys have this, okay, now what moment? And if we start with Julie and then Carol, like, how do you then realize where's your next trajectory? Where's your next step for people who have experienced that? And in our viewers on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, you guys know what we're talking about. You're doing all these things to get to this level. And then when you get to the level, you're like, So, Julie, how did you ever experience that, and how did you address it?
Sure. Well, I do think all physicians, but certainly women physicians, have this piece where you're climbing that ladder. You get done with training finally, then you go establish your practice, and you become a really good surgeon, or you become a really good whatever you are, and you take care of your patients, you take care of your partners, you make sure that you're a good team player, you know how to run your operating room, which is an art form of itself. And then you get there, and perhaps you have children, perhaps not, so you get them raised. And then you sort of maintain, because all of a sudden it's crazy. You may have kids, you may have sick parents, you get involved with societies, you are trying to be presidents and leaders. And then the third stage is really, where's your meaning? Because now you've gone through that, you've achieved this. And where's your meaning on the other side? And Preeti John was actually a resident with us at Johns Hopkins, and she put together that book. And I think the meaning piece for me came after a decade, 11 years of being a chair of surgery. You know, what else can I learn? What other impact can I make? What lessons do I have that I want to play back before I'm finished here? And I could have, similar to Carol, kept running surgery, because after a decade, you know how to do it. But it's really about that whole learning health system that we're involved with. Is what kind of things do you want to learn? And I must admit, it makes a very big difference to me who my boss is. If you see, I've changed jobs quite a few times looking at who's my boss and who's in charge, and really seeing what kind of things I can learn from them as well. So to me, it's just that learning meaning. Now I'm sort of there again. I'm here for 4 years. We now are partnering with Atrium Health. It's a very exciting time. You know, I've got about 4 or 5 more years to do that, and then figure out, is that it? You know, my career's been long and wonderful. Luckily, I've had good health. I think COVID-19 has given us a lot of time to reflect about what those next things are. But I think as you accomplish things, part of it is, what do you want to do next? How are you going to help those behind you? And you can do that by taking on new challenges.
I love that. You know, I went to a AAMC mid-career women faculty leadership development seminars with the world's longest name for a weekend. And one of the main takeaways, I learned a lot there, but one of the things I took away was this concept of the 1-year plan, the 5-year plan, and the lifetime plan, and revisiting your goals each time, because you're right, at the end, it's really different, you know, mastering a particular surgery, or writing your thesis, or getting to your next level of academic pursuit are shorter, very, very important, but shorter. But, you know, raising your family, leaving a mark on the world, that's extraordinary if we can do it in any way. Carol, you know, I have been very fortunate to know you for a long time, and to have laughed with you and taken counsel from you. And I wonder, as you did the things that Julie, that Dr. Freischlag is talking about, how did you educate yourself on the finances, on the HR aspect, on all the other things that you don't automatically know by being the best head and neck surgeon?
So thank you, and I really enjoy. So thank you. It's been a privilege to know you and to follow your amazing career, Sujana, as well. And Julie, thank you for all those comments. And I think one of the many tactics I've utilized is surrounding, you know, building a highly functional team that you can rely on and learn from. So and, you know, you mentioned finance. I kind of like finance. I don't know why I do, but I had the privilege for about 10 years serving on the board of directors of a community bank. But I think, you know, finance is at the end of, it's balancing a checkbook, it's revenue and expense, and it's important. I was also learned early on, without margin, you don't have mission. So you actually have to balance the checkbook so that you have margin to invest in the mission. And so as a department chair of otolaryngology at the University of Michigan, I recruited a really strong departmental administrator who was strong in finance. And then I learned from him. I went over the balance sheet every month it came out and said, what does this number mean? Help me understand. So I really did a deep dive to educate myself. And same in the dean's office at Michigan, where for 4 years I served as executive vice dean for academic affairs. And it's the same balance sheet, it's just on a much, much larger scale because it's all the departments rolling up, but into one very large balance sheet. But again, wanted to really understand the details. And so I think you just have to always surround yourself with great people and then trust them and rely upon them. And speaking to why then did I leave Michigan to go to Ohio State to serve as dean, I think that Julie touched on it really well, because I think it's a great opportunity to be a leader and to make a positive impact, to execute a strategic plan, mission, vision, and to live by your core values. And at the end of the day, it's all about making a positive difference and the legacy that we all hope to leave with our learners, our residents, our faculty, our staff, but ultimately patients, families, and communities.
Thank you so much for that, Carol. I want to remind our viewers that you can ask questions to our wonderful guests, and we are live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And so you can also like this and share it with your friends. We'd really appreciate it, just to get this wonderful message and great show out today to the communities. I want to talk, you guys both talked about mentors and sponsors, and Julie, you described, I think you said Tom came into your office and said you needed a coach. That was a great example of someone who was mentoring you and helping you. But how did you guys address detractors or people, because we've all encountered that, and it's easy to get angry or get bummed out, but how do you actually deal with that? And this is something that everyone faces, even in corporate America, right?
So, yeah, it's a great question. Let me chime in because I think I have a pretty fun story to tell in this regard. I was at a meeting called the Society of University Otolaryngologists, and it was actually one of my first meetings, and I, along with I was actually speaking on balancing career and family. And at the cocktail reception the night before, one of the most famous head and neck surgeons in the planet came up to me and said, Carol, women really belong at home raising their families. And I looked at him, and again, it's a great story because I looked at him and I said, well, thank you very much. And I won't mention his name on this program, but I said, I hope you come and see my talk in the morning, the next morning, about sort of how I aspire to balance. Balance is never perfect. They now call it work-life integration. But I said, please come to my talk, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts afterwards. And so it's one of my favorite talks, and I'm about trying to balance career and family, which is a challenge for those of us who have children. We all do have families, so it's always a challenge for all of us. And then what was really special is that he wrote me a handwritten note afterwards that arrived in the mail a few weeks later, where he said, I understand. I understand your perspectives, and I support you. And we were lifelong career friends. So I guess the moral of the story is you have to be your authentic self and say, and the point is, I love my family. I love my children. I'm blessed to have, a husband and two wonderful children, which is my life story. I realize there are other life choices and stories, but I think that, and they are a priority to me, but I would not have been a great stay-at-home mother, and I knew that. And so I think that there are ways to sort of, quote unquote, try to have it all. And so I just think addressing detractors head on with who you are and what you're aspiring to be and to do as your authentic self was, and in this situation, it worked pretty well.
We have a great a message from Miriam Berkeley, who's watching from the Upper West Side. And she says, I wish I had heard Dr. Bradford speak years ago when I was young. And, we're still young. I've never met Miriam, but she's an awesome viewer of the show. And I'm like, we're young.
There's still time.
We're not dead yet, for God's sake. And I think no matter what our age, we learn from the experiences and the graciousness of others. Both you and him, right? Neither of you were pig-headed. You didn't turn away and discount this person. He didn't turn away and discount you. Yuri Agarwal says, to learn new things as you've progressed, to what extent did you actively reach out to make new contacts? How did you go about broadening your skill set? And maybe we'll start with Julie. Yuri is a professor at Hopkins, actually.
Right. Well, nice to hear from you, Yuri. I think I did exactly what Carol was talking about. When I went to Hopkins, I had a great administrator. I actually math was my strong suit as I went through high school and college along with science. So I too like the numbers, but having a great team to help you understand what's going forward. And when I showed up at Hopkins, we were just starting to use RVUs to measure how much we worked. They really didn't have a great compensation plan.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second. RVU means relative value unit. Can you just describe that to our audience?
Oh, sure. An RVU is sort of a metric. So when you do a great big operation or a small operation, you get a certain number of RVUs to measure how much work that was and then how much you get paid for it. And so we have expectations of every person about how much they're going to work according to these relative value units. Some people have become a little bit RVU addicts, I call them, because they go after too many of them. So I'm not sure it serves its purpose every day, but it also helps to compare people. So I actually learned a lot from people around me. I think reaching out is really key. Most of us would love to tell you about our lives and what we do. So when you're at meetings, or you're on virtual, just like here, ask a question. I tell all my mentees to stand up and ask a question of the paper, tell them who you are, introduce yourself, walk up to someone similar to what happened to Carol at a cocktail party where they do have a comment about what you said and what you did. I mentioned my presidential address from the Vassar Society. It was called On Strategies and Chances. And actually, people came up to me about how do you get a chance? And how do you make that happen? And some of that is you need to walk up and make sure people know you're interested. I also think you should attend a few meetings. I attended meetings for vascular surgery, but I also got very involved with American College of Surgeons. And my best colleagues and my best friends really are from the society meetings and people around, because it's great to have people who give you advice and can talk to you that don't work with you, that you don't work for, that they actually give you great advice because they're your best colleagues and friends. And I'm on a WhatsApp now with a bunch of vascular surgeons, which is fun to have comments and talk. We can't wait to get back to see each other at meetings, to have a drink or a cup of coffee or a meal. I got a lot of my support and strength from those other women coming right behind me, right in front of me, to help us all get that strength and power. But I think you just reach out and ask for those questions. And now you can take online courses. You can take leadership courses online. It's gotten much more flexible. I think the COVID-19 is going to help women in the future to be flexible there. I know Carol and I both used to travel across the country for a 1-hour meeting and fly back home with little kids. And those days are over now. But if you didn't go, you weren't committed, they thought. So now it's going to be eventually much better for women post-COVID with the flexibility of having meetings or associations.
Yeah, but as you said, that networking at surgical meetings, I think we've all done it. It's so important. And as you said, it's the people that you're not working with that you may get the best advice from. I want to shift gears just before the end of our show. As deans, you guys have to deal with this. We want to pull up something from the American Medical Association about bullying and how it's addressed, because it's something that's ubiquitous, not just in medicine, but with the Me Too movement and a lot of, the Time's Up, et cetera. This is just showing a little snippet of what women surgeons' experiences were. And as deans, how do you address this? Because this is something that for our viewers, that this can be something that's actually active in their lives as well. Carol?
So thank you so much. A number of those authors I know personally and have been sort of huge supporters of their work. Leslie Dossett, Reshma Jagsi. So what we have to do is create a just and accountable culture where bullying and creating a hostile workplace is just not acceptable. And we need to create places where these concerns can be reported, because we can't act upon situations that we're not aware of. But in all of my leadership roles, I continue to certainly espouse our core values, whether that's civility, a workplace free from bullying, sexual harassment, gender harassment. And then what we need to do is, when we become aware of issues, we need to take action as leaders. And I always have. Again, any issue I've ever been made aware of, we take appropriate action. And again, whether that's counseling, education, remediation, or even more up to and including dismissal. But that's what we as leaders must do to make sure that we are creating that environment where everybody can feel valued and have an opportunity to thrive. And I would add, in the operating room, it's even more critically important because of patient safety issues. So we need to function in the operating room as a highly functional team. And again, team training of lowering the hierarchy and having clear strategies for reporting any concerns is vital.
We have a little graphic, unfortunately, about the sort of Me Too movement among women physicians, where we do unfortunately experience much more discrimination, gender bias. Women file sexual harassment charges, but then that works to the detriment of their careers and their happiness at work. They're often given punitive actions or felt to be disrespectful, particularly when they speak up. And even patients, if we're not however they expect women to be, we are given worse reviews. So Julie, as in your leadership roles, how do you address the real and then the not real issues that come up? Or how do you make sense of it? And part of it, you said, was reporting in real time, but how do you make sense of it?
And I totally agree with Carol. You have to make sure that you have a great reporting system. Your team needs to know you respond in a way that's equitable and prompt, because you can't wait to respond. So my team now, I've been here 4 years. We've had some issues. I had a very big leader asked a resident to lie about something, and we dismissed that person immediately, because that's just, no matter how you frame that, that's just not something you do. We had another leader that embezzled money, and you just don't do that. And actually, their secretaries knew about it, and were scared to tell us for retribution. So you make sure you take care of those things very quickly and swiftly. You need to work with legal. You need to make sure you're within your rights and all this. But I tell you, making sure you respond. We also are doing bystander training at our institution, teaching people how to speak up in your own way in real time. And that goes with patients as well. We actually have a policy now, and many places do, that if patients aren't respectful of our residents and physicians, that they actually can be fired as a patient, that they can't have preference. If the patient is seeing a physician who's totally appropriate to be seeing them, and they don't like something about the way they look, that's inappropriate behavior, especially spoken out loud in a rude manner. So the bystander training has been very helpful, especially with hierarchical, so our students can speak up And then if there are other issues brought to me, we very quickly take them right to the forefront and solve that problem. And sometimes talking about it. One of our themes one year was diversity and inclusion. And right now, too, we have a theme of community. I think we need to speak out those things that are unfair. We can't promise we'll fix them all today, but that we're aware we go forward.
We are sadly out of time. I could talk with you ladies forever, honestly. It'd take the whole Sunday, but we are out of time. I want to thank you guys so much again. Dr. Julie Freischlag, she's Dean and CEO of Wake Forest Baptist, and also Chief Academic Officer at Atrium Health. Carol Bradford, thank you. So wonderful to meet you. President of the American Academy of Otolaryngology and Head and Neck. Thank you so much for joining us. And she's also Dean at the Ohio State Medical School.
So we are so grateful to the two of you for being here today. Next week, we're going to talk about pediatric cardiovascular health and adult vascular health. And we really hope that you'll join us. And happy International Women's Day to all of us.